Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast with PJ and Mike. Now find yourself a seat at their table.
Hey kids, I'm Mike.
I'm PJ.
And today we'll be discussing the best Stephen King films, right? The best movie adaptions of his books and other TV favorites, miniseries. And to help us out, we have special guest, my dear friend, Mr. Scott Benji.
Hello,
Welcome,
boys.
Scott.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Scott.
All right. So, folks, PJ's going to read a little bit, a bio about Scott. Tell us more about him.
All right. Scott Benji is from Long Island, New York, and he's been close friends with Mike and Mike's brother, a frequent guest on our show, Uncle Rob, for about 30 years. They've bonded over movies, music, and they've been to countless concerts together. Scott has worked in classic rock radio marketing, briefly explored drumming and the music industry, and has dabbled in short story writing and film criticism. Eventually found his passion as a youth services librarian in Suffolk County on Long Island. He now runs book clubs, discussion groups, and writing workshops for kids with the goal of sparking a love for reading and maybe even helping a kid find his gateway into horror and Stephen King.
Nice. So,
Thank you, PJ. 30 years. That's making me feel old right now.
I know, it's crazy. Mm-hmm.
And it is appropriate that we're talking about Stephen King today, who is known for his horror writing and his horror adaptations. And it's Halloween. So happy Halloween, kids.
Yeah.
Happy Halloween, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Happy Halloween.
Thanks for having me. This is the perfect intersection of kind of my job, my interests, horror movies, horror books, and Stephen King being kind of the master of both and combining it all is perfect. So no better podcast for me to make my debut with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you, Scott. And folks, let me just tell you something random about Mr. Scott Benji, and we'll get into our childhood memory. But back in the day, Scott had this amazing ability where he knew every Best Picture, like Academy Awards. He knew every winner of the Best Academy Awards, like Best Picture, from like the first one to, I don't know, 2003. He knew. You can just ask him, who won in 1958, who won in 1979, and he would know. So I don't know.
Kramer 79.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So,
I still got a little bit off the fastball now, but I still got it somewhat.
Okay, all right. So yeah, but I remember as a first meeting Scott, and yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy knows X-Men, and I was just mind blown. So I was, so folks, yeah, we really have a aficionado with us, so it's really
by the way, no Stephen King movie has ever won Best Picture.
Oh, mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I have at the end, I have some more random facts, but just to piggyback off that, where's my thing? Only Kathy Bates, won an Academy Award. She won for Misery. So she's only won from an adaptation to win an Oscar for her performance.
And
so
well deserved, I'm sure.
100%.
One of, if not all, our list. We'll get into that. But yep, Kathy Bates, great.
So we always start off with a childhood memory. So the question is, who got you into Stephen King? How'd you get introduced to him? What's your first exposure? Was it a movie, a film, a book fair, maybe at school? So, Scott, you start us off, man. What's your first encounter with Mr. King?
Yeah, definitely books first. Probably when I was too young, but I remember being 5th grade, 6th grade, getting the horror bug somewhat. Goosebumps, R.L. Stine, then little Dean Koontz, who was kind of the lighter Stephen King.
Yep.
Good, creepy. So I kind of had the horror bug from a young age. And like you said, Mikey, the Scholastic Fair, I remember just loading up on Goosebumps for sure. And then, I don't remember the exact age, but probably 7th grade, 8th grade, I remember just getting Pet Sematary. Man, that's quite the quantum leap from Goosebumps, that's PG, right, to R, skipping PG-13. And Pet Sematary is pretty wicked at any age, let alone 7th grade. But I remember being like blown away by the details, by the gore, by the emotion in it, reading it. But the cover, something about that cover really scared me almost as much as the story itself. So, I remember late at night, just kind of hiding that book away in a dresser drawer, just having it next to me, close to me, really unsettled me. And then morning would come, and I was like, should I go back to it? I had to, and I was captured from that. Definitely, Pet Cemetery. And then from there, I'm like, all right, let me see what else. I knew the titles, I knew the popular ones. Probably after that was Carrie, Shining, Salem's Lot, the biggies. And yeah, even through middle school and high school, he was so prolific. I remember going to Borders Books and every year buying the newest novel. He'd be at least one or two a year. And he still is, which is pretty amazing. So Pet Cemetery was my gateway. Oh, creep me out, unsettle me, but totally loved it, intrigued by it, and that hooked me. And then after that, going back to R.L. Stein, everything was like,
Yeah.
whoa,
Wow, yeah, light years
what
difference.
a difference. So, so I could honestly say that was my gateway into it, and yes, to this day, probably my favorite author still. This many years later.
Wow. I just have a quick follow-up question, Scott. So you read a Stephen King book before you saw one of his films, or aware that it was one of his films?
I think so. That's my first real memory of connecting
Wow.
and having a relationship with King. Though it's possible Christine or Cujo were on TBS when I was that age, and I caught bits and pieces, but
Sure.
probably not even aware that was Stephen King, quote unquote. So
Yes.
yeah, so Pet Cemetery is the one that's in my brain for
Oh,
sure.
wow, cool. Nice.
Entryway. So.
Yeah. Cool. PJ, what about you, man? How did you get introduced to the Master of Horror?
I really never did. I never was a huge fan. Just didn't care. And I say that because when it comes to reading books, when it's fiction, I prefer comic books. Things like graphic novels. When I read a book that's not a comic book, I prefer it to be nonfiction, historical texts, things like
Right.
that. So I never really got into reading like horror novels and stuff like that because it's just not the kind of books I read. So the first time I really saw or heard of anything with Stephen King were the movies. Because like I said, to this day, I don't think I've ever actually read one of those books in full. But the movies, and I'm pretty sure it was Carrie that I saw first. I think a lot of people see that one first, and that's probably the one that's been parodied the most in other movies and stuff, with the blood falling on people during
Yeah.
a party. That's been a trope in so many different like scary movie kind of things, and that's probably the first place I really got introduced to who he was. But there was a comic book series that came out in 2007 based on the Dark Tower. It was an adaptation of the Dark Tower. It was written by Peter David, who is at the time was one of the bigger comic book writers in the industry. I don't think he does much anymore now. And the artist was Jay Lee, who is a very striking art style if you were to see it. And that's kind of how the first thing I probably read, even though it wasn't written by him, it was in that world based on those characters. Like the main character in the comic was Roland. What the hell is his last name? I can't think of his last name, but Roland.
I forget the last name.
Yeah, the main guy was the guy in the book. So that was probably the first thing I ever read that had to do with Stephen King.
Cool. For me, I never read any of his books. I know, boo, I'm a fake fan now. But I think my first real introduction to him, when I was preparing for this podcast, I really thought hard about it. I'm like, you know what? I think it was Stand By Me, which is actually that movie is based off a short story called The Body. And I think back in the day in the early 90s, I think you guys could remember this too. I feel like that movie was always on like Channel 11.
Yeah.
That would like Back to the Future, Predator, and it's amazing how a movie like this, which is, as a kid, I think I liked it a lot as a kid because I guess I related to being with those other boys in the film, and I think it also reminded me of the Wonder Years. I'm sure Stand By Me influenced the Wonder Years just with the voiceover and the narration and all of that. But yeah, that was really at the time I didn't know that was a Stephen King story or anything, but I think that's definitely
I don't even consider that him, but you're right.
Yeah.
That might have been the first one I watched. It might be that instead of Carrie. You might be right.
Yeah. And
it was always you couldn't avoid it on cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always, and edited, of course.
Yeah.
But it's his rare foray into non-horror. There's really no horror elements in it, but but he's so good at capture. I'm gonna get into it, but he's so good at capturing how kids act and talk and emote to each other. I mean, that's one of the most accurate depictions in the book and the movie of just 12-year-olds having natural dialogue. I love Stand By Me.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off, that's one of my favorites. I'll just briefly talk about it. You know, it's directed by Rob Reiner. He also directed Misery. This is this guy who also did Spinal Tap and was it When Harry Met Sally? So this is a comedian who did these two of these, you know, horror films or
Princess Bride. Big one.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But you know, for Stand By Me, folks, the movie's really about. This is what Jerry O'Connell's a kid, Corey Feldman, Will Wheaton. Basically, they're looking to find a dead body, which is pretty dark. You know, these tweens looking for a dead body, and I'm assuming most of our listeners have seen the movie. But even to this day, I hate Kiefer Sutherland in that film. He is a true villain, man. That guy. Every time that guy came on screen, it gave me the ick. Ugh. He's just creepy and mean and a bully. And I think he's scarier than it or anything else, man. You don't want that guy in your neighborhood. So,
You know
or
what
your
my
big
problem with
brother.
that movie is? It's about kids.
Right, right,
And
right.
I
PJ
can't-
hates kid movies,
I
which
can't
is
watch.
funny because you like the new Ghostbusters, but that's a whole other.
It's
That's
a whole other thing, yeah.
Mhm.
But the
P-
kids
P-
are not the best part of that movie.
PJ,
Right.
not a fan of the pie eating scene, pie eating contest.
It's a good enough movie,
What
I
was that?
guess. It's
Oh, Lord
But I
ass.
watched it originally because I was younger. It didn't bother me as much. I'll never go back and watch it now.
Mm.
Yeah. A lot of great lines in that movie. But yes, but Scott, start us off, man. What's one of your favorite Stephen King adaptations into film?
All right. Yeah, I have top 5 here, so I'll go from 5 to 1. We'll go around. That works.
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah,
Um,
well, yep.
All right, I'll start with number 5. I'm picking Carrie, number 5, 1976 Carrie, directed by the great Brian De Palma. Yeah, love Carrie. Pure 70s style. You know, you watch it now, that feels like 1976 with the effects, the split screens, the slow motion. It's filled with style. So it's a kind of a perfect melding of King's novel and narrative with that really intense Brian De Palma filmmaking style, and it's excellent. The melding of the two, it really works. 2 great performances. Very young Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie as the fanatic religious mom, both Oscar nominated, I believe. Neither one. First King book, first King movie, which is interesting. So right off the bat, the movie studios were like, "This guy has something. We gotta."
Yeah.
And I mean, it never stopped after that. I think Salem's Lot and Shining were his next 2. Adapted. So yeah, and then he was off and rolling. Camera angles, revenge. So what King does so well is depict bullying, how it feels to be bullied, and you really sympathize with Carrie. You really feel for her. Like Kiefer Sutherland, that character in Stand By Me, King really makes you hate humans as evil human. I mean, he does that better than anyone I know of. So usually when there's revenge at the end of his movies, you really applaud it. You really feel it. You know, I mean, how bad do you feel when she gets the pig's blood dumped on her and it's a moment of shine and then she just gets back at them with that torrent of fire and brimstone, and it's great. And she's terrific in it. Yeah, it's a tad dated now, but what isn't from 76? It's still great. It's tight. It's 100 minutes. And then the last thing I can really say about Carrie is he was, I think, 26, 27 when he wrote it. And to capture female perspective that well of a high school girl and mom, every male character in it is kind of a bully or a side character. I mean, to be that young and that, in tune with the female mindset, terrific. I'm always impressed by that. So yeah, great book, short book. I believe he was halfway through writing it. He didn't like it. So the legend goes, he threw it in the trash. And his wife at the time, Tabitha, retrieved it and said, "No, you got something here. Keep working on it." And she encouraged and inspired him to finish it. And yeah, the rest is history. So that's always a cool little tidbit about Carrie.
Wow. Oh, that was great, Scott. I think John Travolta's in that, right? I think a
Oh
young,
yeah, I did. Yep,
a
he's
small,
got
yep,
a small role. Yep.
yeah. And I actually printed out a list from the Stephen King his own website. Actually, it's very fitting because the movie was released on November 3rd, so it's right around the corner,
Oh wow.
and it came out in 1976. So I don't know when that book came out. I'm sure maybe the year before.
74, I think, a couple of years
Wow.
prior.
So sounds like it was a hit as a book, a bestseller or something, and then someone said, "Hey, we got to turn this into a movie," and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, I think when it was a hardcover, mild sales, and then then it comes to paperback a year later, 8 months later, and for whatever reason, I remember reading once it came out on paperback, it just kind of caught wind and word of mouth, and then once the movie studio grabbed it, I think then then it continued to be on the bestseller list for quite a while.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, great choice and great recap, man. Fantastic. PJ, what about you, man? What do you have on your
Um,
list?
I put The Green Mile on my
Oh
list.
yeah.
Good one.
That's actually probably of all the movies that I've seen that are based on Stephen King's work, probably my favorite. It's not necessarily a horror movie or by any stretch. There are supernatural elements to it, which I think are handled very well. But the cast in that movie is just so great
Oh.
that it had to be good because you have Tom Hanks, you have Michael Clark Duncan, Sam Rockwell's in that.
Oh, he plays a great nut in that, man.
He really does.
Like Scott
He-
said, he's Stephen King's very good at making you
Yeah.
hate, and that guy was such like a
Yep.
worm, and
Yeah.
just a vile person,
So-
man. Ugh.
There's some other good people in that movie too. The director of that movie is Frank Darabont, but he's not like the biggest name guy with a huge library. I think he's done a couple episodes of Stranger Things. He's done a few other episodes of TV shows, a couple of movies, but he's not like
Walking Dead, I believe. is a
Walking
big one.
Dead. Yeah,
I
he
was
did
just
a
about to
bunch of
say
Walking
that.
Dead.
Yep.
He doesn't have like a big catalog though of like things that he's directed, but whatever he did made that movie work really well. I love the scene when he brings the rat or the mouse back to life.
Oh, Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles, yeah,
Yeah.
like that always stuck with me. How this big guy who is like in prison for being a terrible person, but is like gentle and wants to bring this guy back to this little mouse back to life. And when he cures the kidney disease, I think it was kidney disease that Tom Hanks had.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think all those scenes really were done well. Um, whenever I'm at work and I have to like go into the building and I'm like miserable, I always like walk from the elevator to my desk and like walking the mile, walking the mile. I still say that it's very quotable, very memorable. I think that's probably my favorite Stephen King movie.
Yeah, I think his name was John Coffey. I know because you say I'm not sure if his first name was John. It was like coffee, like the drink.
Yeah.
Michael Clark Duncan, and I think even though like you said it's not really a horror film, there's some horror film things in it. When like remember he gets electrocuted.
Yeah.
That scene is like
That scene is
Yeah.
intense.
oh my heavens, oh my god.
He didn't soak the sponge enough, and
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that's good.
Oh
Yes.
man, wicked
Holy-
stuff.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
my god.
Real quick, that book, I read the book, and King released that in an interesting way. Late 90s? Yeah, late 90s. So every month he would release part one, part two. So it came out in like 6 or 8 parts paperback. So it would leave on a cliffhanger. So there'd be little novellas, kind of like short stories, but a little longer, 80 or 100 page. So it was like a 600-page novel broken into 6 little paperback books. And he would release them once a month. So it would leave on a cliffhanger. You'd buy chapter 1, and then the next month you'd buy chapter 2. That was different. I still have them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. That's almost like a comic book esque.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Holy crap, that's awesome.
But the Green Mile's good. Yeah, it's 3 hours. Doesn't feel it. Great acting.
Yep.
Michael Duncan breaks your heart. He's terrific. Hanks is always solid. Supporting cast is great. Yeah, it's affecting. Yeah, it's a good one. Green Mile's good.
And that one guy, I think his name was Percy. He was the guy who didn't wet the sponge. He was just as bad as Sam Rockwell. Oh, despicable.
Really, the characters in that really were done well. You hate the ones you're supposed to hate, and you really love the ones you're supposed to love.
Yep.
The acting, the writing was spot on for that. Like the characterization really was good.
Yep.
The dialogue is good. That's a real solid movie. Take that out of like the Stephen King world. Just in general, that's a real solid movie.
Oh hell yeah. Absolutely. For mine, I know I mentioned it before, but I got to talk about Misery because I think this is the first film I saw after probably Stand By Me. I think my dad rented this movie. I don't know why I was watching it at 8 years old. Um, but um, but yeah, this movie stars James Caan and Kathy Bates. Like I said, just later on, she went on to win an Oscar for it. I'm assuming Best Supporting Actress.
No,
Um,
actress. She's actress.
okay,
Lee,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay. Um, and just folks, what it's about, this is from Wikipedia. The plot centers around an author who is held captive by an obsessive fan who forces him to rewrite the finale to his novel series. And folks, man, I remember as a kid, I think I was like hiding underneath the blankets watching this movie, and like it's just like, man, it's just like your worst nightmare to be just to to be trapped in this situation. Like he ends up getting in a car accident. This woman takes him in, and she ends up being a huge fan. Obviously, she's very obsessed and forces him to write this book. And oh man, I just know I can't recommend this movie enough. It's just so cool. There's some brutal scenes. I don't want to even spoil it for folks. Just I'll just say there's a sledgehammer involved, and oh man, I remember just and to this day, I guess I'm doing a light spoiler here. Is he tries to escape. He's moving a piece of like knickknacks, and she knows he was walking around in the house. And to this day, I always know. I always like I at my office at my job. I purposely put things in a certain place so I know if someone was in there, I know someone touched it. And it's because of that movie. It's because of Stephen King. It's my little way to know, hey, someone was in there. Someone touched my Back to the Future bobblehead. So but yeah, such a good movie. And like I said, it was directed by Rob Reiner. And man, it's just so good. And I can keep going on and on and on about that movie.
Yeah,
It's
Mikey,
so
if it's
good.
on my list too, you want me to chime in now or you want me to
Oh, of
wait?
course. Yeah. Go, man. Yeah.
I mean, but even though it's on my list, I'll go now and then, like, you don't have to wait.
You can go again.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can
yeah.
just want to do your next pick. That's fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no, Misery. Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good two-hander, and that's basically a two-hander. It's James Caan going mano a mano with Kathy Bates. They're both excellent in it. Kathy Bates gets all the accolades and well deserved because she goes from sweet nourishing and into psychotic in the blink of an eye, and it's pretty impressive acting. But James Caan, he captures pain so well, feeling him suffering in that
Mm.
bed. You just kind of know that's another thing King is so good at capturing, just human pain. Yeah, some iconic scenes. It doesn't get boring. There's not a minute or scene wasted in it. Again, it's pretty short, 100 minutes. The camera work stays interesting. For a pretty confined space. The house pretty well by the end of the movie. So every little nook and cranny and every hallway, and you kind of just know that house inside out. It captures winter really well.
Yes.
Cut telephone lines, isolated. And the other thing, King likes to write about writers. So you could see himself really in the mind of James Caan. And I'm sure King has had some obsessive fans in his career, and he just exaggerated and elevated it for this story. Because she was so unhappy with how the final book ended when she read it that she wanted him to rewrite it. So that was the big tension in the movie. And yeah, it's great. Misery's awesome. Great music score. Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner's done Stand By Me and Misery, two of the best for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's lean, not a wasted scene. Scary stuff. I love Misery. It's great.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Scott, what's your next choice? Mm-hmm.
I'm going Shawshank Redemption, 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not horror. Classic. Who doesn't love Shawshank Redemption? It's still one of the top 3, if not top 1, on IMDb's top ranked movies. It's always right up there with Godfather and Casablanca and Shawshank and Pulp Fiction, which were the same year. Oh, by the way, 1994, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction. That was the Oscar trifecta.
Wow.
Any of those 3
gosh.
could have won. We don't get them like that anymore. Like the
No way.
Right? So that was great. Yeah, Shawshank is great. Not much I could add to what a great character study it is. Morgan Freeman, Tim Robbins, 2 towering leads, got memorable set pieces. it builds and it builds to that beautiful last 20 minutes. And no matter how many times you watch it, still gives you chills. Remember the first time you saw the guard throw the rock through the poster, and you see the
Yeah,
light in the tunnel, and you're like, did he really just do that the past decade? And it's still
right.
amazing knowing that
Yes.
slight twist ending. Based on a
Also
short
directed by Frank.
story. That was Darabont, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
Frank Darabont did the two King prison films.
Yeah. Totally. All I can say is just kind of what we see. Obviously, a common theme here. Just characters you hate. The like the I
That
guess the
has
head
it too.
warden. Yeah, that
He
head
used the word
warden.
bully again. He used the word bully. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really evil.
And I always just love the ending where like I love movies where it's almost like it almost comes like a caper, and you see like how we switch things out in the safe. It's just so cool. Um, and I just how that movie ends. It's just like I feel like it's like a big hug at the end. I think it ends on that with a hug. But man, I just love how it ends, and it's amazing. That movie came out in '94, and I work with a lot of teenagers, and they weren't even born. And I have so many who say like on the last day of school, like, "Oh man, it's like Shawshank when I escaped school," and they just
Oh,
raise
nice.
their arms in the air, and it's just funny how a movie that old has just transcended time now. So it's other generations, and yeah, super cool. I mean,
Yeah,
sensational film.
yeah. That last thing, that ending, no dialogue needed. On the beach, you see
Yep,
Tim Robbins slowly walking toward Morgan Freeman. The camera pulls back and back and back, and it's perfect, perfect.
yep. And I love the music in that movie too.
Great
Um,
story.
mhm. Mr. PJ, what do you got on next on yours?
My next one is actually not a movie. It is a
Hey.
TV show.
Oh, I have some of those on mine too. Yes.
Yeah, this was. It's not that old either. It's kind of newish. It was from 2018. There were 2 seasons. I've only watched the first. Castle Rock,
Heard it was
streaming on
good.
Hulu.
Never watched. Okay.
It is a great piece of television, if you ask me. And I can only speak for the first season. I heard it took a dive in the second. I don't know. I didn't see it. But it's based in the town of Castle Rock, Maine, and that's where a lot of the books take place in Maine because that's where he's from. It had a great cast. I'm trying to pull up some of the names that were in that. Bill Skarsgård was in it.
Mm.
Sissy Spacek is in the show. Tim Robbins, I think, is in there. Um, Jane Levy. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's been in, I think, Shameless. I don't know if you've watched Shameless. I think she was in that. And Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. She was in that TV show. And I think she was in the remake of Evil Dead. So she's been in a bunch of things. And Lizzie Kaplan, another actress that's in it, who's from Freaks and Geeks and Cloverfield. So it's got a lot. And I also think Mean Girl she was in. So there are a lot of like big name actors that came out for this show. And basically, it's a supernatural horror show that takes place in the town, and it references all of the other books. Like, things will happen in there, and you'll be like, I remember that from, The Shining. I remember that from whatever, right? Cujo, whatever. And they reference it, but it doesn't like go into the story or those stories. It's just a reference of things that have happened, characters that exist in the world. And it's multiversal, right? There's a whole multiverse piece to it, which is a big thing in Stephen King books with the Dark Tower. That's all about multiverse stuff. And multiverse stuff is actually also pretty popular just in the world right now because all those Marvel movies. So it came out at the right time when people were willing to accept that kind of a story. Because usually that's not a big element. Like for a million years, if you would have asked someone what a multiverse is, they wouldn't be able to tell you. It wasn't really something touched on in movies. Marvel made it more approachable, and now this Stephen King Castle Rock show was able to exist, I think, because of Marvel. And it's really well acted, well directed show. It's tight. I think it's 8 or 10 episodes. I think it's not like it's a 22, 23 episode season. It's a tight show, limited episodes, and really, if you like Stephen King, you'll probably like the book because you'll pick up the references. I didn't even pick up half of the references because I'm not a big fan of his work, but I know people who are that watched it and picked out even more things than I did.
Wow, PJ, I've heard of that show, but that was great. Scott, are you a little bit more familiar with? I'm not sure if that was a book or.
No. Castle Rock is the fictional town up in New England that he invented, that most of his stuff takes place in. So Yeah, so I never saw an episode, and I definitely want to now. But
Okay.
yeah, it wasn't. It's kind of based on the Stephen King world. So, like PJ said,
I
each
see.
episode cribs a little bit from here and there. I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I heard it's good. Definitely.
It is very good, and I think that came out before Bill Skarsgård was in it. I
Mm.
Oh,
think,
huh.
and
Okay.
I think that's kind of where they got the idea. Maybe we should cast this guy because it came out in 2017, and Castle Rock. I don't know. Castle Rock was 2018, so maybe it was the other way around. But I'm sure his involvement in one of those pictures got him involved in the other one.
It almost seems
I
like just such an obvious idea that surprisingly never happened before. Just a United
Yes.
King world like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, no, PJ, you inspired. I'm actually going to get to my TV pick. Um, so folks, I remember watching this with my dad. He like rented it, like I think actually from the library. So it's a TV series. I'm not sure if it's on a book. Or maybe I'm sure Scott would know. It's called Storm of the Century. On
Yeah, I think that was a short,
Mhm.
one of his short story collections.
Okay, so folks, like I
Another one I've never seen.
yeah, it's super cool, and I'm trying. I pulled up the best way to kind of to do a synopsis. So a dangerous blizzard hits an isolated town and brings along a mysterious stranger intent on terrorizing the people for his own desires. So just to kind of fast track what the show is about is I think it takes place in Maine. There's like a hardcore like snowstorm. They're very isolated, and all of a sudden this dude appears. No one knows his name, no ID, nothing. I'm going by basically memory here. Long story short, he's like, I'm not gonna go until you give like basically like someone has to sacrifice their kid to me. I'm not gonna get out of here until someone does. I'm gonna keep killing someone until someone does that. So anyway, it's just really super creepy. It's intense. Um, the best way I could explain it, it's one of my favorite stories. I read it back in college. It's from a different author. I think she's a big fan of Stephen King. Joyce Carol Oates. She read this awesome short story called "Where Are You Go? Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?" And it's basically when like the devil basically knocks on your front door, like on how that encounter kind of goes. And this movie is, or this TV series is kind of basically like that, where like basically the devil comes to your town and makes this demand, and he doesn't flat out say he is the devil. It's very more mysterious and weird, and you know, supernatural and everything. But man, it is just so cool and very eerie, and um, like you said, Scott, he's very good with like um, depicting winter, isolation, and like desperation to like just get rid of this evil. It's such a
Yep.
cool thing, and I haven't seen it since like 1999. Where but yeah, I remember seeing that. It was really super cool. So definitely recommend.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I have
Hmm.
no. I'm not as familiar with a lot of the TV ones. And there was a lot. Once I looked it up, I'm like a lot of made for TV movies, a whole slew of them
Oh
actually.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Towards the end, I'm gonna do my little just random trivia about stuff, and I have some
Mm.
interesting stuff. But Scott, who else you got on your list?
All right, I had Carrie, I had Shawshank, and number three, I'm going for The Shining, 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Yep,
Much
that's on
like
my list as well.
much like Brian De Palma's Carrie, The Shining is a melding of the King narrative and the cold, evil Stanley Kubrick tracking shots and production design of the hotel. And King famously didn't like the adaptation that Kubrick did of it. His main gripe was that Jack Nicholson seems pretty unhinged from the 20-minute mark until the end, where in the book, Jack has an alcohol problem and he's trying to cope with raising a family and dealing with his alcoholism and running the hotel. And it takes a good 250 to 300 pages before the crack seeps in because King is so good at building that suspense with character.
Mm.
Um, I love them both. I can't, they're both great. It's hard to envision anyone else in that role outside Nicholson. And Kubrick famously had his multi takes. He would do 70 takes of Shelley Duvall on the stairwell
Yeah.
So her performance is hardly a performance. She is just suffering. And he is filming, and the score is iconic and
Yes.
not so much scary as in jump scares. It's just, to use the word again, unsettling from minute one.
Mm.
The synthesizer score, the long tracking shots, the crane shots.
More of a
Um,
psychological thriller than
yep,
Yes.
psychological for
right on
sure.
horror movie. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. PJ.
You feel the downward spiral and the descent of Jack's madness, and it has iconic moments. The axe through the doorway, here's Johnny. Um, the maze outside at the end, through the shrubbery. Once again, isolation, winter, untethered from humanity. Yeah, The Shining is great. It's been talked about to death. It's been analyzed to death. You could YouTube documentaries on people's theories on it. Probably more theories than King or Kubrick even thought were possible in there. Yeah, it holds up great today. It was in 1980, and I think he wrote that in 77. So that was in his hot streak. That was Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Dead Zone, The Stand. Boom, boom. Those were his first
Wow.
five. He could have
Yeah. Yeah.
retired then
And
as a legend.
Yeah, and you're right, Scott, because the first movie that was adapted into film was Carrie in '76, and then on my list, the next one was The Shining in 1980. Correct. That was on my list too, folks. So, I mean, Scott, I can't top what he just said, but just to give some random facts about this. So, initially, the movie was panned, and in the first iteration of the Razzies, it was nominated for Worst Director and Actress.
No, wow. Get out of here.
I'm not actually surprised by that.
Right, because people said
Shelley Duvall, I'm not surprised at. Kubrick, I'm surprised at.
Yep, people said it was too slow and boring. And I got off like IMDb, and this one I saw like one of those reels back in the day. It always stuck with me. It was an interview, and and someone said that when Stanley Kubrick was doing auditions, they're putting out names. Maybe didn't necessarily audition, but they were picking out names. And he said that Robert De Niro wasn't crazy enough. They were thinking about Robin Williams. He was too crazy. And I guess Jack Nicholson had that right balance of just the right amount of crazy.
Yeah.
So,
interesting. Robin Williams. Later in Williams' career, he was doing like 1 hour photo and
yes.
And
Yep.
kind of villains,
Yeah.
but he was too
Insomnia.
young.
Yeah, Insomnia.
He
was good.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that young 1980 Robin Williams, that would have been weird.
Oh yeah.
That's not the first role that Robin Williams was up for that went to Jack Nicholson. I don't know if you know this. Robin Williams was almost the Joker in Batman '89, and it wound up going to Nicholson. So not the first time that Jack has beaten out Robin for a lunatic character.
Interesting. That I could see more, but Nicholson's a great Joker.
Yeah, absolutely.
PJ, you a fan of The Shining? You've seen it?
I'd watch it. I mean, I don't think it's my favorite of his movies. I understand that why people feel like it's a little bit slow and drawn out for sure. But
it's slow. It's a different pace than today's audiences.
My last thing, and I'm curious to hear PJ's next choice. I'll just say with this, I think with The Shining, I'm really curious. I think I'll just say this. I think it's a movie you need to see in theaters. I think it'd be totally different. When you watch in your home, it's different. I think when you're there, I think you feel like you're stuck in that hotel with him. So I don't know what the folks thought in 1980, but I think, I would really like to see that movie back in theaters. I think it would be really a cool experience. PJ, what about you? Any last choices?
I have one last random thing that I doubt either of you would have on your list. It is from 1998. It is actually the 10th episode of season 5 of the X-Files.
Oh,
that's deep.
Yeah, that's a deep
cut.
cut. That's a deep cut. Stephen King wrote. I think this is the only episode of the X-Files that he's written, and he's not really known for writing TV shows, like episodes of a TV show, really. But the X-Files. This is 1998 season 5, so this is probably right around the time of the movie, so it's at the height of its popularity. And the X-Files fits into his wheelhouse for sure. It's horror, it's supernatural, it's spooky, and he wrote an episode called I wrote it down. Hold on, the Chinga, which is essentially it's about a doll that's possessed, and the doll can make other people do different evil things like claw their eyes out or beat themselves with a hammer and all this crazy stuff. And there's an investigation has to be done because someone dies, and Scully and Mulder obviously go down to where they're going to investigate this, and the episode takes place, of course, in Maine. As a nod to Stephen King, the episode Scully and Mulder travel to New England and they investigated, and of course the first thing Mulder says is this is probably witchcraft and something supernatural, and Scully tries to play it off as not being that, and the investigation ensues. The X-Files is probably in my top 5 TV shows of all time. I love the X-Files, and this was a Monster of the Week episode, which are some of my favorites. It wasn't like a hardcore mythology episode, so it only takes place about this story. They don't have to tie aliens or anything into it. It's just a horror story written by Stephen King for a 44-minute episode of TV featuring 2 of the best characters ever created, Scully and Mulder, and I just think it's a great episode of the series.
Yeah, PJ, I know back in the day we did an episode, we talked about, I think, our favorite TV shows.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but I definitely got to check out the X-Files, man. Sounds great. I just really have my honorable mentions after this. So, Scott, if you want to finish us off, I think you're maybe up to your last 2 picks.
Yes, good counting, Mikey. You're on it, but we spoke about them both already. My number 2 and 3. 2 is Misery. Covered already. Love it.
Oh,
Perfect.
Okay.
And number 1, Stand By Me, which you captured earlier. Stand By Me is my number 1, 1986.
Okay.
Directed, again by Rob Reiner. And that's all. That one to me encapsulates everything King does best. Nostalgia. And I mean, I don't think you'd have Stranger Things. And you mentioned The Wonder Years without Stand By Me. Captures real fear, the emotions of teens. It's perfectly cast. River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Jerry O'Connell, Will Wheaton. I mean, can you think of 4 better kid actors for those roles? They're so good.
Yeah.
And you're saying without this movie, there'd be no Stranger Things or no Wonder Years. Really makes me wish this movie never existed.
I think PJ, though, I think you do like this movie because Scott, you just inspired me. I think it also, you wouldn't have The Sandlot because I think that has a lot of the same kind of
I could see that vibe.
I could see it.
Kind of gets like a sense of like nostalgia, almost like the end of The Sandlot. It's a little like, kind of emotional. People start vanishing in Vietnam.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it starts getting pretty dark all of a sudden.
Stranger Things ripped off.
Oh, for sure.
King and Stand By Me wholesale. And I'm okay with Stranger Things. I watch it. It's entertaining enough. But yeah, I mean, it's cribbing directly.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah, dealing with bullies growing up and then having, for 12-year-olds, having each other's back. I mean, it captured it so perfectly. The ending hits hard. It's 86 minutes. It's great. So look at that. Rob Reiner, number 1 and 2. Stand By Me and Misery.
Yeah. Perfect. So I'm just going to mention, we can go around some, if you have any honorable mentions. And these are some of these are great. These are the ones I just didn't get a chance to really deep dive in. But I think the movie Cujo, when did it come out? It came out in 1983. I think that movie's, it's not amazing, but I think it's worth checking out. It's pretty cool. I love
Isolated in the car once again.
Yeah.
One setting.
Yep. The next is Christine. I love the movie Christine. That's what the car that's basically alive. I have like the toy. I have the replica. I love Christine. I just love that movie. And oh man, it's just so good. I just love that movie. I also put here. It's actually more of an action film, The Running Man, and I think they're actually remaking that film. That's what Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm going to ask Scott a quick trivia question. Do you know the other pen name that Stephen King goes by? Because he wrote this story under a different name. Do you know that name?
Yeah, he did it back in the day. He did a few under Richard Bachman.
Yes, my man Scott. Exactly.
No, I love The Running Man. I mean, it's more of a mid-'80s Arnold movie.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah,
It
I
is
love that
pure
movie. Yeah,
80s action and cheese, and
yeah, I love
that
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 movie.
that could I could see that working as a remake for update for modern times.
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And another one. I know this movie. It might be one of our. We'll shortly after this, folks. We're gonna do some maybe about the worst Stephen King adaptations. But I think this movie's not that bad. I enjoy it. I remember it being on HBO like 1 o'clock in the morning. Thinner. I like that movie. It's not
Mm.
mind blowing. Basically, this lawyer guy. He gets to make a long story. He's like a lawyer, and then he gets cursed and he ends up losing weight. He ends up becoming like basically like a skeleton, and like he ends up using his own uh uh like power as a lawyer and connections to like get back at these people, and they basically make a deal to reverse the curse, but that also backfires. But anyway, I really like the movie Thinner. So
Yeah, read
uh,
the book. Never saw Thinner. Read the book though. It was good.
yeah, it's a movie you watch like on a snowy
Yeah.
day, and while you're eating your oodles and noodles, ramen noodles, and it's like an hour and a half, not even an hour and 20 minutes or something. Simple to watch. But any honorable mentions for you guys?
I have one, and
Mhm.
it's actually another TV show.
Mhm.
Another Hulu TV show, fairly recent. It came out in 2016. It's called 11/22/63. I
No,
don't know if you're
JFK,
familiar.
JFK assassination, time
Yeah,
traveling. Yep. The
Uh,
book.
basically the
Didn't see the
plot
movie.
of the show and the book is that the main character is able to travel back in time, and the whole plot is he going to be persuaded into preventing the assassination of Kennedy? And like I said earlier, I don't read a lot of fiction novels. I read mostly nonfiction, and I've read and watched so many documentaries and read so many books about the assassination of Kennedy and all the
mm,
conspiracies behind it. There's tons of X Files episodes about it. There's that's just something that like has so much history behind it, and that I like alternate reality takes on some of these events, and so that was pretty cool. That would be my honorable mention. I don't think it's as good a show as Castle Rock. I don't think it's the best thing I've ever seen when it comes to his movies and stuff like that, but it is entertaining, and the subject matter is great, and it stars James Franco is in it, who
Hmm.
this is before he got canceled,
right.
so
Oh
he's
wow.
yeah.
It's like little time travel, right? A
Yeah,
time for
but there's a couple other people in it too. I think Josh Duhamel is in it, a couple other people, but good cast and an interesting concept for a show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anything from you, Scott? Any honorable
Yeah,
mention?
yeah. Two quickies. It chapter one, not chapter two. They split it into they made a 6 hour movie into it. And part two was with the adults.
Yes.
The book weaved it in together. Kids, adult, and it kind of flowed
Mhm.
better. The movie separated the kids and the adults. That it didn't work really. I didn't think. But part one is really good.
Yes, the
That
first
opening
one's awesome.
that opening
Yeah.
15 minutes, Pennywise in the sewer is really scary and really good and really sets the tone for it. The kids are good. Yeah, it's chapter one, and that was a blockbuster. That made
I
300
prefer
million.
chapter
That was
two.
just a
Yep.
huge,
Mhm.
yup, huge movie. Good. That's right. That's in my top 10. It part one is great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
there was it miniseries two from 1990 with Tim Curry as the clown.
Yes. Mhm.
Scary too. TV budget, TV feel. So certainly dated and neutered a little bit, but not bad. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then to go full circle, Pet Cemetery, 1989. Good, little bit of late 80s B movie trashiness, but in a scary way. That's a good movie. That had some imagery I could still remember today. It's really creepy. Directly from the book. Directed by Mary Lambert, who did American Psycho a decade later. Um,
Oh.
One of the first female directors to tackle a horror film like that, and pretty viciously. I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know how it holds up, but that '89 Pet Cemetery, yeah, didn't hold back. Really, King's even admitted that was his cocaine era. He was really out of his head a little bit before he sobered up. So even Pet Cemetery, he looks back on it and he says, yeah, I probably went too far with some things in there. He wrote Cujo in the mid 80s too,
Mm.
or 80, 82, 83, and in a week on a cocaine blitz. So if you look at the novel Cujo, just to sidetrack real quick, it's not broken up into chapters, it's 300 pages, and it's just a 300-page chapter. He was just so out of his mind, he just typed and typed and wrote and wrote and wrote and handed it to the publisher. And when it was done, it was 300 pages, beginning to end, not broken up. And the publisher kept it that way. Interesting.
Cool. Huh. Oh, wow. That's awesome. I love that. So yeah, folks, I think we're just going to talk about briefly some of the worst adaptations. I don't know if you guys want to go around or just kind of just ramble them off. What do you guys want to do?
I have 2 or 3, so
yeah,
you guys go first. But we don't have to go around. I think we can ramble them.
Yep. For me, I'm just start with. I'll end with my. I think is the worst. But Maximum Overdrive. I think that's one of his worst.
He directed it. His solo directing effort.
Yes. And that movie's. I remember I watched that maybe when I was like a teenager because I like have like the Green Goblin as the front end of the truck, and it's not very good. And I'm actually. I think why it's not for me. It's not the. Well, it's one of the worst, but I think this movie actually can be remade and be more of a fun movie. I could picture Jason Statham doing that. I mean, the guy's fought giant sharks. I could picture him fighting alien semi trucks. So
it's a terrible, terrible movie outside of the AC/DC soundtrack, which is good.
Yes. And my other one was actually, it's another TV series. It came out in 95. I remember watching this with my dad and my brother. I remember it started off cool. I'm not sure if it's based off a book or a short story. Maybe Scott knows. It's called I hope I'm pronouncing this right. The Langoliers.
No, I think totally original screenplay, not
okay. So I don't know how. It's basically about time travel. So basically, these Cousin Balky's in it. I can't think of his name, but the guy from Perfect Strangers.
Bronson Pinchot.
Yes. He's also in True Romance. He has a small scene. Anyway, basically they go on the plane, and when they get off the plane, the whole airport is completely deserted, and then just kind of weird. It's like I feel like the first few episodes, I can't remember how many there are. I don't know, maybe 4. It was like once a week. It was like a big TV event. You don't really have those big TV events anymore, unless it's sports or like a political debate. But that's when everyone had to sit down on their TV and watch something. But yeah, I just remember like the first 2 episodes were cool, and then after that, it just got kind of dumb. I remember at one point, this is very early CGI. I guess the Langoliers are these like little like Pac-Man dudes, and they're like eating like reality. I don't know what to even explain it. But I remember that movie gave me a headache at that point. Yeah, it's I guess it's something to watch if you really want to see something, but definitely not one of his best. PJ, you got that?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, what were you saying, Scott?
No, yeah, said based on that plot, King could get a little zany from time to time. Not all, just talking about this. Not all of his stuff is great, certainly, but.
Mm-hmm.
The one I have on my list for his worst is The Dark Tower.
That's bad.
That movie is just impossible to sit through. Is
that the one with Denzel? I'm sorry, PJ. Is that the one with?
Matthew McConaughey is in it, and it's so bad. Idris Elba. It's not Denzel. Idris Elba.
Oh, okay. Now I'm getting.
Yeah, Idris Elba is the gunslinger, and Matthew McConaughey is. I can't think of the character's name now. That doesn't matter. It's terrible. Yeah, Idris Elba plays Roland, who is the gunslinger, and Matthew McConaughey is the villain in that movie, Walter Paddock. It's tough to explain that movie quickly because there's just so many layers to what that whole Dark Tower series is about. But what I will say is that was supposed to be the start of a franchise, and it was the end of a franchise because it never went past the first movie because you couldn't sit through it and find anything enjoyable about it. I thought it was terribly written, the movie, terribly acted. The pacing was off. The direction was off. Garbage movie. One of the worst, I think. Whether it's his movies or, again, the way Green Mile, I said, is just one of the best movies even outside of the Stephen King world. Yes. This is one of the worst movies, even outside of just comparing it to other Stephen King movies.
Damn. Scott, what about you, my man?
Yeah, Dark Tower's up there. I'm not even a huge fan of the series. I read a couple, 5, 6 books. It's a huge world, and they condensed it into 90 minutes. Big mistake. It's incomprehensible. Even if you read the books, But if you didn't, forget about it. Yeah, that was a mess. That was a mistake. Should have left that one alone. Dark Tower is pretty much unfilmable. It's legendarily unfilmable, and they tried it and failed. They should have tried at least a TV miniseries where they could stretch it out a little more. Anyway, real quick, Firestarter, 1984. Loved the book. Terrible movie. Young Drew Barrymore. The book had a lot of political overtones and kind of cat and mouse suspense thriller. Where the movie, 1984, like wanted to show off special effects like Ghostbusters and the new era of makeup and Gremlins and the whole thing. It kind of came out that same summer of '84, and it really stripped the story of any poignancy. It's really terrible to watch now. Real '80s era. No humor, no suspense. Firestarter is a great book, terrible movie. And Drew Barrymore is just bad. I hate to say Kid Action is bad, but she's not good in it. It's hard to watch. And then the last one is Dreamcatcher. Have you guys heard of that one from 2003?
I heard of it. I never seen it. I remember it coming out. I remember that. Yeah. I never seen it, but I remember the.
Big cast: Thomas Jane, Timothy Olyphant, Jason Lee, Damian Lewis, childhood friends, battling monsters later in life, meeting up again. Decent book, quality king. And the movie is terrible, and it's directed, of all people, by Lawrence Kasdan. If that name rings a bell, he was the writer of Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you can't even believe that he, I think he had adapted the screenplay and directed it. It's pretty much unwatchable. No suspense. It's almost like, am I watching a comedy here? It would be better if it was a comedy, but it's not. It's unintentional humor. It's too long. It's 2 hours, 20 minutes. The book wasn't great, like I said, but certainly could have had a better adaptation than that. So Firestarter and Dreamcatcher, and there's at least a dozen more bad ones. As many good ones as King has, there's a whole slew of bad ones too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for Stephen King, I mean, like, I don't know how many things he's released, but it's almost like it's like a baseball player. Like his batting average is insane. Yes. So like he's due to strike out. Okay, even paper strike out.
He's still doing. He's in his 80s. He's still doing at least a book a year. I think I don't know. I think he's got at least 60 novels, short story collections on top of it. So
incredible.
Oh yeah, one last tidbit. He dedicates himself to writing 20 pages a day.
Whoa.
He puts that in his daily routine. 20 pages, good, bad, decent, indifferent. He just disciplines himself to write 20 pages of something a day. And that's how he keeps the brain sharp, he says.
Yeah. I love it. So, folks, before we do our top 5 Stephen King adaptations, they could be the films or the TV series, I just want to share some other trivia about Stephen King. So, PJ, you might appreciate this first part. So, in 1985, King wrote a few pages of the benefit X-Men comic book Heroes for Hope starring X-Men. He wrote the introduction to Batman number 400, an anniversary issue where he expressed his preference for the character over Superman. In 2010, DC Comics premiered American Vampire, a comic book series co-written by King and Scott Snyder and illustrated by Raphael Albuquerque.
Yeah, that is a great book, American Vampire. I've read it, and I don't think I ever realized he was involved in it, but it's a great book.
Yep, and they say that King wrote the backstory of the first American Vampire, Skinner Sweet, in the first 5 issues story arc. And this next one is pretty cool. And Scott, I'm not sure if maybe you know this. So he had a book called Rage, and it's a psychological novel. And it was the first book he wrote under his other name, Richard Bachman. It was released in 1977, and basically the school's about, and this might get us, we're not even monetized on YouTube. I just found a lot about the algorithms, like you can't say certain words. But anyway, this book is about it's about a school shooting, and
never read it.
Yeah, so this, like I said, the book's called Rage. The novel describes a school shooting and has been associated with actual school shootings which incidents happened in the 80s and 90s. In response, King allowed the allowed the novel to fall out of print.
Hmm.
And I guess as a response to that, in 2013, King published the anti-firearms essay, Guns. So yeah, interesting. He
Wow.
let one of his own books
You probably can't
go,
even find it. Yeah.
yeah,
Can't even find
erased.
that one now, probably. Yeah.
Kind of
Wow.
like, yep, kind of like Back to the Future, erased
Yeah.
from existence. But I'm sure someone has it somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Check eBay.
yes. So, guys, I wrote down a lot of our choices. Okay. So we had Carrie, The Green Mile, Misery, Shawshank, The Shining, Castle Rock, and X-Files. A lot of us had some of the same choices. So any of those, just kind of think they're must-haves on there.
Yep. Oh, for best adaptation, yeah. The Green. I love The Green Mile, like PJ said. And I read the whole 6-part series, and yeah, that's really an exquisite adaptation of that. That really captured the whole vibe of that into the movie. I think that's perfect. That's got to be absolutely that's a tough book to adapt to, and they did a great job.
I think we got to put Shawshank on there.
Absolutely.
I think we got to put Misery on there.
Misery for sure. Yep, that's another difficult one to tackle.
Yeah, and I
feel like The Shining is the most iconic of all.
You gotta,
and you gotta put The Shining. Yep.
And I know it's a short story, but I think we gotta put it on. Is Stand By Me.
Yeah. Yep.
So we always PJ and I always say, this comes the hard part. Okay, so this is tricky. What do we think, guys? Out of these, Stand By Me, Shawshank, Green Mile, Misery, Shining, who's numero uno? I think any of these could be number one, but
I
for
think
our panel
it's
tonight.
Mile.
So
what did PJ say?
I think
it's like Green Mile.
Green Mile's good. Yeah, not The Shining. I love both, but as far as adaptation, it's just so different. They're two different entities. So I'll eliminate that one.
I think quick. Maybe we could put number 5 as Shining. I think we can hold it with that.
Rank
all right, so that'll help us out. So Shining's number 5. Okay.
What were the other 4, Mike?
So now we have Shawshank,
Great.
Green Mile,
Great.
Misery, and
Great.
Stand By Me.
Great.
I know the murderer's row of
Stand By Me so short. It's great, but as far as like an iconic adaptation, they pretty much just filmed his narrative. So maybe it's Stand By Me 4.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing
so.
with that. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so now we're left with going across the south, folks. Okay, so they're left with oh my God, Shawshank, Green Mile, and Misery. Holy shit!
Murderer's Row. And the two prison ones.
Yes, that's funny. Yeah.
Shawshank's iconic.
I know.
Perfect.
I think the 2 prison ones are 1 and 2.
Yeah. So
I love Misery. I'm good Misery 3. Yeah, it's a coin
Okay.
flip for me for the prison ones. I love them both.
Okay.
I might go Shawshank 1, Green Mile 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might have to go
That's an
Shawshank 1.
It's like 8+ to 8+.
He got outvoted.
That's right.
It's a coin flip. They're so close.
So just to read off our top 5, folks, we have number 5, The Shining. Number 4, Stand By Me. Number 3, Misery. Number 2, Green Mile. And number 1, The Shawshank Redemption. Oh my God, what a sensational list. Woo.
Get busy living, get busy dying.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, before we wrap up, Scott, we just want to thank you for coming on the show. You were sensational. We got to have you back for other film reviews and book
thanks.
reviews. Like I said, Scott is a film aficionado, a book aficionado, and he's just sensational, so well spoken. So, Scott, would you like to share any plugs? Maybe people can find your short stories or anything else that you want them to
no, I'm not so much a social media guy anymore, though I was in the past. So honestly, I kind of disconnected somewhat from social media. I had a short story collection out on Amazon called Battling Demons under my name. I believe it's still on there. Guess what? It's Stephen King inspired short stories.
All right.
I haven't read them in a while. I don't know how well they hold up, but if you're interested and curious, check it out.
Cool.
Love it, hate it, pan them, praise them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Battling Demons, folks, by Scott Benji. Check it out. Anything else, Mr. PJ?
No, I don't think so.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Check out these awesome films we talked about. Happy Halloween, and thanks again, Scott.
You got it, guys.
Same time, same table.
Have a good one.
Boys and girls, lunchtime is over. For more information, visit their website at coolkidslunchtable.podbean.com. Follow the boys on all social media platforms. Just search Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast. Now get to class before you get detention.